Greetings, true believers, and welcome to another astonishing episode of History of the Marvel Universe. What we know of the early life of the man called the Mandarin is dubious at best, mostly because the claims regarding his origins have come from the Mandarin himself, and it has been heavily implied that he has lied about his early life. For the purposes of this video, we will tell his tale as it was originally presented, before we examine a story which shines a light on which parts were potentially fabricated. And so the story begins around the year 1920, with a child born to a British noblewoman and a wealthy Chinese businessman, who was supposedly a descendant of Genghis Khan. Shortly after the boy's birth, his father was crushed beneath a falling statue, and his mother died of a broken heart. Many locals regarded these tragedies as ill omens looming over the newborn. The boy was then raised by his father's sister, who was embittered by the responsibility. She considered abandoning him in another town so that she might have unfettered access to her inheritance. However, as she plotted, thunder struck and a chandelier fell. Taking this as a sign not to hurt the boy, the embittered woman instead swore to raise him to hate the world as much as she did. As the boy grew, he spent his fortune learning everything there was to know about science, warfare, and the subtle arts of villainy. And if this story sounds absurd or fantastical, let us remember that this is how the Mandarin relayed his own background to his hated enemy Iron Man. It is very likely that the details were embellished in a deliberate attempt to create an ominous mythology around himself. Nevertheless, we continue. By the 1940s, the boy, now a man, had attained a position of power and was regarded by many with a nigh mystic awe. However, he lost both his home and his standing during the Communist Revolution of 1949. His aunt died shortly thereafter, and the man walked alone with only the clothes on his back. Despite this, he refused to sully his hands with work, convinced that the gods would provide for him. As he wandered, he eventually made his way to the fabled Valley of Spirits. However, that forbidden place had another name spoken only in whispers: the Valley of Dragons. And as the man investigated, he entered a cave and discovered the long-dead remains of one such beast. Startled, the man lost his footing and tumbled down, only to be met with an even more unexpected sight deeper in the cave: a massive alien spacecraft. Entering the crashed ship, the man discovered a strange helmet which, when worn, showed him the craft's origins. The alien vessel had come from the planet Maklu 4, or as it is sometimes called, Kakara Nathara. The skeletal remains the man had witnessed actually belonged to the ship's pilot, Axon Kar. The McLuhans had crash-landed on Earth centuries prior, and because of their draconic appearance were attacked by ancient humans. Axon Kar was grievously injured and returned to his cave where he met his end, and the Valley of Dragons became a forbidden area. After hearing the tale, the man also discovered what was ostensibly the ship's power source: 10 glowing rings bedazzling a pair of cylinders. 10 rings of power that the Mandarin claimed for himself. 10 rings that he believed would give him the power to rule the world. But now we must ask, how much of this story is true and how much is a complete fabrication? Well, at one point in his career of supervillainy, the Mandarin abducted a talented filmmaker named Jun Shan and forced him to make a movie depicting his life story. While some of the details given to Jun were consistent with his earlier boastings, such as his father being a descendant of Genghis Khan and his mother of English nobility, other aspects differed. More importantly, we are shown in flashback what seems to be a far more accurate version of events. If these sequences are to be believed, then the Mandarin's mother was in fact a white woman who worked as a prostitute in a Chinese opium den. Furthermore, while the Mandarin told Jun that his parents died in a car crash, a far more mundane death than the ill omens surrounding his birth that he had previously claimed, it seems the truth is that he had killed both of his parents himself. He also claimed that he was raised by his mother's sister and attended exemplary schools all across Eurasia. If his lies weren't apparent enough, this is also inconsistent with his earlier claims of being raised by his father's sister. In fact, the truth may be that he never had an aunt at all. Rather, it seems he made his living by taking over and running the opium den where he was born. In any event, the Communist Revolution in China spelled the end for any power and influence he did have. He claimed to be a hero of the revolution, which brings us to the primary difference in the story he told Jun Shan and the one he told Iron Man. With Iron Man, he was a hated enemy, a terrible villain of great power, and the story he told was meant to aggrandize his own evil. With Jun Shan, he wished to paint a portrait of a hero, noble in his standing and just in his convictions. However, the actual events are unimportant. His true lineage may in fact be a mystery. The real truth, the ultimate secret of the Mandarin's origin, is that he will change the story, cater it to who he tells it to, based on what he wants them to see of him. One thing that cannot be denied, that has been confirmed several times over: one fateful day in 1954, the Mandarin did indeed stumble upon that strange alien vessel in the Valley of Spirits. Some tellings claim that he came across the long-dead body of Axon Carr. Others imply that he came across an injured alien within the vessel. However, if any beings were alive within the crashed McLuhan vessel when the Mandarin entered, they surely weren't when he left with the 10 rings of power. Settling into an abandoned castle in the Valley of Spirits, he slowly retrieved McLuhan technology from the nearby ship to outfit his new headquarters. He spent years studying the alien devices, most notably the 10 rings. He came to realize that each ring had a different and unique ability. Wielding all 10 powers at once, he wore one ring on each finger and spent decades mastering their use. He also discovered the source of the ring's power, that each one contained the soul of a legendary alien warrior, or so the Mandarin has claimed. Over the decades, he has mastered the use of each of their powers. The art isn't always consistent on which finger has which ring, particularly early on, but these are the traditional powers and placement of each one. On his right pinky there is Nightbringer, the Black Light Ring. This ring can cast and manipulate a veil of pure darkness. On his right ring finger is Spectral, which can fire a disintegration beam that takes 20 minutes to recharge. Spin rests on his right middle finger, allowing him to fire a vortex beam that manipulates air currents, while his right index finger wears Influence, which can project different kinds of energy, including impact beams and sonic blasts. On his right thumb is Remaker, a matter rearranger which the Mandarin has often used to convert air into poisonous gas, while his left thumb wears Daimonic, or White Light, which emits forms of energy from the electromagnetic spectrum. Incandescence on his left index finger can generate an intense flame burst, and on his left middle finger is Lightning, which fires an electroblast. The Lyre, otherwise known as the Mento Intensifier, is on his left ring finger and serves as a mass hypnotizer. And finally, Zero rests on his left pinky and can unleash an Ice Blast which nears absolute zero. Many of these rings have also displayed additional powers in more recent years, meaning that in these early days the rings had not yet reached their full potential. The Mandarin used the rings to establish his power and build his reputation by subjugating nearby villages. He created a network of citadels and surrounded himself with loyal followers. As his influence grew, so too did his ambition, and he began to lust for domination, first of his home country, and then the world. During these years, he sired an offspring of his own whom he named Temujin, after his alleged ancestor Genghis Khan. The son of the Mandarin was sequestered in a remote monastery where he was intensely trained for his entire life. At some point he also had a daughter named Sasha, but she was presumably raised by her mother, Justine Hammer, who was herself the daughter of the notorious Justin Hammer. The Mandarin also took in several young girls who he had educated and trained in the arts of villainy. One of these girls would grow up to become the sinister Madame Macabre, but she retired after being defeated by Giant Man and the Wasp. Another girl, Huan, became the assassin known as Lady Killer. She was eventually rehabilitated by the Avenger Wonder Man, but she took her own life when the leader of an assassin guild known as the Nobility attempted to mind control her into murdering a room full of heroes. Another young woman, Mei Ling, was chosen to be his bride upon reaching adulthood, but she eventually turned against the Mandarin after witnessing the depths of his villainy. It was also during these early days that the Mandarin first discovered the dormant remains of the alien android known as Ultimo, but it would be years before the villain was able to revive and command the robot with a combination of science and sorcery. Eventually, around the dawn of the Marvel Age of Heroes, the Mandarin realized that the Ten Rings had not yet reached their true potential and sought access to their full power. To this end, he enlisted the aid of a man named Wang Chu, a warlord from the neighboring country of Sin Kong. Wang Chu abducted the world-renowned scientist Professor Ho Yinsen. Yinsen was forced to study the McLuhan rings and seek a way to unleash their full power. However, Wang Chu also took captive the American industrialist Tony Stark. Yinsen was brought in to aid Stark in building weapons for Wang Chu, but instead the pair designed and built the very first Iron Man suit. Sacrificing himself to buy Stark enough time to power up the suit, Yinsen died before the true powers of the Mandarin's rings could be unlocked. As his first heroic act, Iron Man then defeated Wang Chu and destroyed his camp. The armored Avenger subsequently donned a makeshift disguise and wandered into the jungle. However, watching unseen from a distance was the Mandarin. Perhaps he could have destroyed the strange metal figure then and there, but for some reason he stayed his hand. Intrigued by what he saw, the Mandarin allowed his target to escape that day, little realizing that someday soon the Iron Man would become his greatest adversary. After returning to America and rebuilding his armor into a sleeker and more efficient form, Iron Man learned of the Mandarin from the US government. Military High Command asked the armored hero to investigate the potential threat posed by the Mandarin, leading to the first real confrontation between the two, and subsequently the Mandarin's first real defeat. However, this was far from the end, as the invincible Iron Man would continue to foil the Mandarin's sinister plots over the years. Plots that included hypnotizing his own son into a sleeper agent in an attempt to assassinate Tony Stark, or tricking the Chinese government into triggering a war that would weaken all of his enemies, and even reviving the alien robot Ultimo, intending to use it in his conquests. But all of these evil schemes were foiled by Iron Man. However, Iron Man isn't the only hero the Mandarin has battled. He was one of many villains to be manipulated by Dr. Doom into attacking the wedding of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. He upgraded the swordsman's equipment in an attempt to infiltrate the Avengers and destroy Iron Man's allies from within, and he later recruited the swordsman and several other villains to his side, including the Living Laser, the original Power Man, the Executioner, and the Enchantress, in his efforts to unleash a worldwide hate ray, and was even able to reactivate and unleash the robot Ultimo yet again. These times his plans were thwarted by the combined efforts of the Avengers. He also made two separate attempts to take control of the Incredible Hulk. One effort was thwarted by Colonel Nick Fury, agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., while a second attempt, in which he allied himself with the villainous Sandman, proved equally fruitless. While the Mandarin was indeed a formidable opponent for the heroes of Earth, his early schemes were all ultimately thwarted. Seeking once more to increase his powers, the Mandarin attempted to manipulate the royal family of the Inhumans into unearthing the Eye of Yin, a mystic artifact created by McLuhan-trained sorcerers. However, the Mandarin was beaten by the Inhuman King Black Bolt and separated from his rings. The Inhumans sealed the rings underground, and the Mandarin returned returned to his homeland defeated. Seeking a way to reclaim his weapons, he again traveled to the crashed McLuhan vessel. There he found a headband which linked the wearer to the 10 rings. This allowed the Mandarin to summon his rings from halfway across the world. Re-energized, he joined forces with another villain, the Unicorn, to strike back at his old enemy Iron Man. However, the headband he wore had unexpected powers, and the Mandarin accidentally placed his mind in the Unicorn's body. Since the Unicorn was terminally ill at the time, the Mandarin made a quick escape, intending to reverse the transfer. However, upon returning home, he discovered that in his absence, his castle had been occupied and taken over by another Chinese crime lord, the Yellow Claw. He retreated to an underwater safe house, but while he was able to build a machine to transfer his mind back into its proper place, that facility was unable to power it. And so the Mandarin captured the Japanese mutant Sunfire and forced him to power the machine. Restored to his proper form, the Mandarin reactivated Ultimo yet again, intending to retake his castle from the Yellow Claw. However, his efforts were complicated by the interference of Iron Man and Sunfire. The Mandarin infiltrated the castle and challenged the Yellow Claw directly, or so he thought. As it turns out, the real Yellow Claw watched safely from another room while the Mandarin clashed with a robot duplicate. After the robot was fatally damaged, it exploded, killing the Mandarin. The Yellow Claw's servant, Lock Do, claimed the 10 rings for himself, intending to become a new Mandarin. However, the original Mandarin had gained increased control over his own consciousness, and was able to transfer his mind into the rings themselves upon his death. Killing Lock Do and taking full control of his body, the Mandarin remade his new form into one resembling a younger version of his previous self. After this, he continued his plots for domination and his battles with Iron Man. Not only Tony Stark, but also Jim Rhodes during his time in the armor. He later sought to increase the power of his rings once again, specifically the range of his Mento Intensifier. However, something went wrong, and in a flash of light, the Mandarin was left comatose. In the confusion, one of his rings was stolen by an old man named Chen Shu, and replaced by a counterfeit. The rings were still tied to the Mandarin's consciousness, and so while his body recovered, his memories were fragmented. No longer remembering his blood feud with Iron Man, he took the name Zhang Tong and established a criminal empire operating out of Hong Kong. During this time, he also employed operatives, each allowed to wear one of the 10 rings to expand his reach. This group was known as the Hand, but has no relation to the Japanese ninja clan of the same name. Although Zhang Tong would also ally himself briefly with Matsuo Tsurayaba, who was himself a member of the Japanese Hand. Anyway, the rings would ultimately return to the Mandarin even if the operatives who wielded them were captured or killed. And indeed, this new criminal enterprise inevitably pitted the Mandarin against his nemesis Iron Man once again. It was also during this time that the Mandarin joined forces with other villains as a part of the Acts of Vengeance conspiracy, in which they plotted to pit their enemies against foes they had never encountered in an ongoing effort to keep the heroes off balance. Eventually, the Mandarin realized that one of his rings was fake and tracked down the old man Chen Shu. Placing the missing ring back on his finger, the Mandarin reclaimed his full power and memories. Chen Shu also revealed to the Mandarin the location of the sleeping dragon, Fin Fang Foom. The pair revived Foom, intending to use him in their conquest of Earth. But then, while the Mandarin and Foom battled Iron Man, several more dragons arrived. In truth, Chen Shu, Fin Fang Foom, and the other dragons were of the same race as Axon Kar, alien invaders from the planet Maklu 4. Chen Shu had only been using the Mandarin to gain access to his resources and advance his own plans for global domination. In order to defeat the dragons, Iron Man and the Mandarin were forced to combine their powers. Iron Man's armor was able to supercharge the Mandarin's rings and completely destroy the McLuhans. However, the Mandarin's hands were also vaporized in the blast. But this was not the end, and through sorcery and willpower, the Mandarin was able to grow a new set of reptilian hands. Returning to the site of his previous battle, he sensed and retrieved the 10 Rings of Power, which also survived the blast. When Iron Man and his allies next encountered the Mandarin, he had empowered himself using an ancient talisman known as the Heart of Darkness. However, Stark was able to disrupt his connection to the heart using a techno-organic virus. The Heart of Darkness imploded, but with the last flare of its magic, it transformed the Mandarin into a simple custodian, his hands fully human once more. He was left amnesiac for a time, but eventually returned with his full memories. Since then, he has continued to clash with Iron Man while trying to accomplish his schemes and goals. He has allied himself with other sinister entities such as Ezekiel Stane and even Hydra. His motivations are simple. Despite what he may sometimes claim, he is not a villain with some just or righteous cause. He is a man who once tasted power and continually lusts for more. While his first clash with Iron Man was more a matter of business, over the years of battling, their enmity has become far more personal. During these years, he has used many different aliases during different schemes. Jean Khan, Zhang Tong, Tambor Jigin. However, his true name is still shrouded in mystery. After one defeat, he was actually captured and imprisoned by the Chinese government. For months, the world believed him dead, but the Mandarin remained locked away, refusing all nutrition and sustaining himself solely with meditation and internal energy. During this time, his son, Temujin, briefly took his place as the new Mandarin. He resolved to bring tranquility to the world rather than the fear his father caused, but he eventually wavered in his conviction. Of course, the original Mandarin later broke free and returned with a new sinister plot. This time he intended to transform the world into a meritocracy by unleashing the Extremis virus, which would kill most of the population while leaving the survivors stronger than ever. He even grafted the rings onto his spine so that he wouldn't be separated from them again, but this backfired when Iron Man ripped half of them from his back. However, the Mandarin escaped, having used the Extremis virus on himself, restoring his body to a younger and stronger state once more. He emerged yet again, having reclaimed his missing rings, returning all 10 of them to his fingers. While the full potential of the 10 rings may yet be unknown, over the years some of them have had additional powers unlocked. While influence was initially used to project impact beams and sonic waves, it is now described as being able to create forces that cause a body to undergo change. The white light created by Daimonic can now compel victims into loyalty or obsessive behavior. That may sound similar to the hypnotizing effect of the Liar, but that ring achieves its power by creating a mental illusion. However, the Liar can evidently affect the wearer as well. Spin, it seems, has seen the greatest shift in power. Previously able to generate air vortices of various intensity, even allowing the user to fly, it is now able to affect the flow of time around the wearer, effectively granting them super speed. Spectral, which houses a deadly disintegration beam, now also has a similar ability to warp air currents, and can also cause the wearer to become partially or completely invisible. Finally, Zero, the Ice Beam Ring, has been discovered to operate by opening a beam of nothingness from the vacuum of space. It can also generate a deafening boom by creating a large vacuum which is quickly filled with air. At one time, after the Mandarin was seemingly killed by Ezekiel Stane, the rings even became sentient themselves. This was the result of a McLuhan artificial intelligence program that was affected by the psychic imprint the Mandarin had left on the rings. And so the rings themselves bore a grudge against Iron Man and sought out new wielders in order to attack him. But this situation has since been resolved. So whatever happened to the Mandarin? Well, when he was last seen, the Mandarin had allied himself with Baron Zemo and Hydra as a part of their sovereign nation of Bagalia. However, Frank Castle, the Punisher, had taken a personal interest in striking down Hydra's plans, and assassinated the Mandarin with a bullet capable of penetrating his force field. Is this truly the end for the mad villain? Or will the Mandarin find some way to rise once more? Well, only time will tell, but thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, share the video, and subscribe for more marvelous content. Be sure to leave a comment letting me know what Marvel hero or villain you want to hear about next, and as always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page, where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special thanks here. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!